Hello and welcome in once again to the most accurate podcast, Waiver Wire edition, for week 13. Lucky Thanksgiving week 13. That is right. It is Monday morning as I record this, which means in just a few days, it will be Thanksgiving. Happy Thanksgiving to everybody who it celebrates, at least. I hope you all have some great food plans on the horizon and some great fantasy plans because it is going to be a fun week for football, as it always is. Uh, as was kind of this last week of football. Week 12 was wacky. A lot of good NFL games. Fantasy was a little more strange. Felt like a lot of the guys we were hoping in, or at least the guys I was hoping in, didn't really show up. Maybe it's just a bad week for me and I'm projecting. That said, we did get to watch Saquon Barkley rush for 255 yards or something last night, which was absurd. He is the best running back in fantasy, one of the best running backs in fantasy in recent memory, and should be in the MVP conversation, even though he won't be because he's not a quarterback. One game left to play in week 12. That is Ravens Chargers tonight. Should be an absolute banger. I'm hoping for a strong end to the week and have some huge fantasy implications as well. But let's get into the week 13 waiver wire top 5 ads. If you want to see the rest of the list, if you want more of my analysis, if you want priorities of the top 10 and of every position or at each position, you obviously want to go check out the waiver wire column at 4for4.com. Need to be a subscriber. So if you're not subscribed, do that with promo code YouTube and you get 25% off of the subscription amount. All right, let's get into it. Number one, Marquez Valdez-Scantling. That's right. We are hearkening back to a pre-bye, because the Saints are on bye this week, ascending star that I think a lot of people might have forgotten heading into week 13. Only rostered in 24% of leagues, despite the fact that he was near the top of my priority list a couple weeks running now. Basically, I will reiterate what I have said in the column and in this show a couple times. MVS is, at least in intention, the second coming of Rashid Shaheed in New Orleans. They very specifically went out and got Marquez Valdez-Scantling after Rashid Shaheed had to be shut down for the year because MVS is that speed, deep threat, run after catch in open space kind of guy that Rashid Shaheed was. Now, don't hear what I'm not saying. I don't think MVS is as talented as Rashid Shaheed, though could be argued he, playing the deep third or fourth fiddle for a lot of teams that he's been on maybe wasn't the right fit for him. And maybe he needed to be more featured in the way that New Orleans has so far and could continue to do in even greater quantities, because he hasn't seen many targets yet. But Chris Olave still out. I think it's highly likely he'll be out the rest of the season. Obviously, Rashid Shaheed out. I believe Mason Tipton is still on IR for a couple weeks. So it's Taysom Hill, who is getting a lot more targets now as a result of all this. And it is Alvin Kamara. But then at wide receiver, I think it's Marquez Valdez-Scantling. And he doesn't need that many targets to be valuable on a weekly basis because Derek Carr just loves hucking it downfield. And you only need really one of those to hit to have a decent day and two of those to hit to have a great day. So, next 3 games are Rams, Giants, Washington. Not bad at all. The Saints should be throwing a lot. I think he is going to be listen, he's still volatile and risky. There's no question about that. But I think that his upside will outweigh his risk more often than not. So I think he'll maybe every 3 games he has a dud, but 2 of those games or one of the 2 other games is a huge game. And then the other one is like a solid game. So you get a huge game, a solid game, and a dud. And that's kind of just what most wide receivers are outside the top 12 or so. So I think he's a top 30 guy rest of season, at least at the which means he's a must add pretty much because in bye weeks that could make him a wide receiver, and good matchups that could make him a wide receiver too some weeks, and in flex positions he will be commonly usable as well. So I really like Marquez Valdez-Scantling. Add him. I've got a 8 to 9% fab budget suggestion. I don't know that you'll need to spend that much because, again, 24% roster coming out of the bye, but we will see. Reminder, if you have any questions, any start sit decisions for next week, any waiver wire pickup or drop decisions, trade questions to make or to ask, drop them in the chat, and I'll get to them after we get to the top 5. Let's go to number 2. It is Noah Brown, wide receiver for the Washington Commanders. I feel pretty confident this is the first time he's made this list, unlike Marquez Valdez-Scantling and probably most of the people in the top 5. Season highs this past Sunday in targets with 10, catches with 6, and he racked up 71 yards, which was almost his season high. He was also just the most effective and the most effective receiver up until Terry McLaurin broke off an 86-yard, silly, stupid Cowboys defense didn't want to play broken touchdown in the fourth quarter. But up until then, Noah Brown was the most effective, and for the entirety of the game, he still was the most used with those 10 targets. 4 of his last 5 games, he's had 6 or more targets. He had 60-plus yards in 3 of those 4. And listen, he is going to disappear every now and then, probably, because he's not a true elite number 2 like a Devontae Smith or something. He had 1 catch for 4 yards 2 weeks ago. So that will happen. But in good matchups, what appears to be a role that is maybe the clear 1B to McLaurin's 1A, maybe the 2 to McLaurin's 1, but the 2 doesn't get 10 targets that often. And the 1 doesn't need a broken 86-yard touchdown in the fourth quarter to outperform him. So I think he could be really interesting down the stretch. I'm not like Shaheed, I'm starting pretty much everywhere. I think in most lineups, most formats, in most lineups. Noah Brown, I don't think that is the case. I think it's going to be more of a couple guys are on bye and he has a good matchup, so I'm going to put him in my flex kind of thing. But that's in a very important position to fill in fantasy, especially as we head down the home stretch and towards playoffs. So I think Noah Brown is a great option to fill that hole. I got him at 6 to 7% fab bid. I think that, again, you probably might not need to pay that much because 10% rostered, not a big name. But we're getting down to that point of the year where you kind of just have to get the guys you want because we don't know how many other opportunities we're going to get good guys, if that makes sense. Also, could be the case that not everyone has a lot of fab bid left, so that matters as well. Feel free to check in on that before you make any bids. Let's go to number 3. Number 3 is running back Jaylen Warren. He has been in the waiver column a lot this year. I don't know how often he's made it into the top 5 because most of the time he's just somewhere in like this is an important handcuff running back you need to have. And he is rostered in 59% of leagues, which just makes the cutoff for this column and this show 60% or lower. But Jaylen Warren should be rostered in 80, 90% of leagues, pretty much. He is one of the most valuable handcuffs in fantasy. He is a guy, one of the few handcuffs in fantasy that can have week-to-week flex value, as we saw this past week. Warren had 64 total yards and a touchdown, 13.9 half PPR fantasy points, which was better and more efficient than Najee Harris, even though Harris got more carries. Warren is more used in the passing game, and the schedule down the stretch is a little tougher for the Steelers, which could mean they need to pass a little bit more than they run. Bengals, Browns, Eagles are their next 3 as an example of that. But more importantly, like, if something happens to Harris, if he gets injured, Jaylen Warren is one of the guys who would be an absolute league winner. And he is still flexible every now and then. So with that combo of usefulness, He needs to be rostered everywhere. He may not be available in your league, but if he is, go check. It's very likely that I would be dropping the bottom player on your roster currently for Jaylen Warren, because the bottom player on your roster is probably some wide receiver 5 that you're almost never going to start and doesn't have that much upside. And that's not the case for Jaylen Warren in either respect. So big piece to add. Go get him if he's available. Let's go to number 4. Devon Vele. This is a name that has probably not crossed the waiver column, except maybe once prior, which was last week, and has definitely not crossed the waiver show, and may not even have ever crossed your ears. Devon Vele is a rookie for the Broncos, rookie wide receiver. Last week, I think he's a 7th round pick, if I'm not mistaken. That's off the top of my head, so don't quote me on it. But last week, I had him in the waiver column, and I said he's by no means a must-add player. He's kind of just an intriguing guy you could stash away in a deeper league. That changed maybe a little bit this past week. He had 9 targets, caught 6 of them for 80 yards against the Raiders. Courtland Sutton is dominating for Denver. He looks like a legitimate fantasy wide receiver 1 rest of the season with how consistent he's been, scoring touchdowns still. He got 2 in this game. So that takes away from Vele's upside a little bit, but 6 catches on 9 targets for 80 yards is plenty of upside for a waiver wire wide receiver 2. He seems to have established himself pretty strongly in that role for Denver. And with Bo Nix playing as well as he is, and with a very soft schedule down the stretch, I think that the Denver wide receiver 2, who's showing talent, could actually be a fantasy play a few times for the rest of the season into the fantasy playoffs. So 3 straight games with 10 plus fantasy points if you play in full PPR, obviously close to that in half PPR. I think he has the upside to make a couple starting lineups in a couple weeks for the rest of the year and return really strong value in those weeks. So I have a 4 to 5% fab bid. Again, you may not need to bid that much because most people don't know who this is. I've never heard this name. He's rostered in 5% of leagues. So very acquirable player, but I think a pretty interesting one. I think he should be added in most leagues. Let's go to number 5. Last pickup of the top 5. It is Ameer Abdullah, and you may be a little surprised to see him drop this far after what he did in week 12. But I do not believe that Zamir White and Alexander Madison are going to miss a lot of time. And I am concerned that Ameer Abdullah would go right back to the role he had been in prior, which was a 2 to 3 catches a game receiving back and pretty much nothing else. Now, that being said, he looked pretty good in this game. Only 8 carries, had 28 rushing yards in week 12 as the starter, but 5 catches on 6 targets for 37 yards and a receiving touchdown. Obviously, this was with his first chance. It was what was pretty much the starting and lead back role this past week with Alexander Madison and Zamir White out. The big hope would be that the Raiders see in Abdullah more, versatility, better play, and say, sorry, Madison and Zamir White, who are about as low upside, unflashy as it gets. Even when you are healthy, I think we're going to give Ameer run as the top back. I think that's pretty unlikely. This guy is 31 and a half years old or something like that, has been in the league for something like 8-9 years, and has never, ever become this true starter that we thought he could be after, I think it was one preseason play that was incredible, and the whole fantasy community freaked out. That's never materialized, and it probably never will materialize. So I don't think Ameer Abdullah isn't like an RB1 rest of season, needs to be added in every league. 10%, 15%, 20% of your fab budget kind of guy. If we get news that Zamir White or Alexander Madison, probably and Alexander Madison, are going to miss a lot of time, or that the Raiders want to turn to Abdullah as the starter, then this goes up and his priority is much higher. But I think unless you play in PPR formats that are very deep, Abdullah is a risk to go back to being basically nothing once one of these guys returns. So I have him. All that being all that was me poo-pooing him. But again, I have him in the top 5. That's because I think it's possible that those other guys don't return, and it's distantly possible that Abdullah does take the job regardless. For that reason, I think he's worth picking up. There's not a lot of stars this week, to be perfectly honest, on the waiver wire. There's not a lot of upside. So that's part of the reason that someone like this slips into this area. If you need less of a short-term ad and more of a long-term stash, like you're set for the playoffs, Jonathan Brooks is very next guy on my running back list. He's worth considering over Abdullah, especially if we get any news today, Monday, or Tuesday on the other backs and their injury situation. All right. That's the top 5. Once again, Marquez Valdez-Scantling, Noah Brown, Jalen Warren, Devon Vele, and Amir Abdullah. A bunch more names. A lot of them are in similar tiers as these guys, as well as some quarterbacks and tight ends if you need them. Go check out the article. Full list is in my column, 4for4.com/plans, to sign up and subscribe to 4for4 to get access to that column. Promo code YouTube for 25% off of that subscription. Really worth it. Obviously, I'm biased, but 3,000 to 4,000 words every week of waiver wire goodness. All right, let's get into some Q&A. Once again, if you have any questions, drop them in the YouTube or Twitter chats, and I will try to get to every single one if I can. Michael Quenzel, friend of the show, opens up with, "Hello, Matt. Pick 2 stashes, Roshan Johnson, Blake Corum, Jordan Mason, or Jeremy McNichols. Thank you for this show." Okay, well, right off the rip, I will say Jeremy McNichols carries a lot of extra interest because Rashad White and Bucky Irving. Rashad White and Bucky Irving. I was thinking of a different red team. Brian Robinson Jr. and Austin Eckler both suffered injuries in Week 12. Brian Robinson Jr. seems to tweak his ankle twice, or a different ankle, once early in the game and once late in the game. Left and didn't return from the second one. And Austin Eckler suffered a really scary concussion that seemed to just knock him out for a long period of time. Both have, I think, a good or a decent chance of missing time, particularly next week. If that happens, Jeremy McNichols would become the starter for the Commanders. And that would be a very valuable role for him in the short term. So keep an eye on that. If we get news by Tuesday afternoon that Eckler and Robinson will miss time, I think McNichols becomes the most interesting ad here. If you are very set at running back and are just looking for like handcuffs that could become RB1s down the stretch, which in fairness, maybe just Jeremy McNichols is already, if those injuries are the case, probably not, because I don't think he has the same RB1 upside. Roshan Johnson would be number 1 out of the crew you mentioned. Absolutely. He has showed he can be a goal line back over DeAndre Swift recently. He's got the frame to be an RB, carry a RB1 workload if something happens to Swift, and Swift has been banged up a little bit already. Of the other guys, Corum and Mason, I mean, it's basically a toss-up there. Both have very, very strong RB1s in very, very good roles in good offenses ahead of them. So it's kind of just a question of, well, who gets hurt, Kyren Williams or Christian McCaffrey? And it's pretty much impossible to predict that. I think you can honestly coin flip it between those two guys. I might lean Mason if you force me to, just because we've already seen him be great with McCaffrey out. And maybe there's a chance what McCaffrey's got flares up. And so, Kyren Williams doesn't have something like that. But that's my little bit of a tiebreaker. Sam Burks asks, if I have Trey McBride as my main tight end and Evan Ingram as my backup tight end for injury reasons, is it worth dropping Ingram for an upgrade at wide receiver? Let me check real quick. I think the Cardinals just had their bye. Yes. You can absolutely drop Evan Ingram. I do not think you need to worry about having a backup to Trey McBride. Most often, if you have an elite tight end, I don't think you need to worry about a backup. You'll be able to pick someone up off waiver wires if something happens. And it's better to hope that he just stays healthy, which is kind of your best bet at making a fantasy championship anyways. and go for upside at another position. Sam Burks goes on to say, I currently have McConkey, Devontae Smith, and D-Hop at wide receiver. Yeah, if you can get you're not going to get a waiver wire guy who's like a major stud and better than those guys out the gate necessarily. But if you can get someone else to fill out your core, get a little more depth, and stream the best guys in the right matchups, that's very important with a receiving trio that looks like that, because that's not super reliable. Jermaine Robinson says, I traded Tracy and Addison for Mike Evans, and of course, Addison has a career day. SMH lol. Yeah, this is honestly a good trade. I like this. I wouldn't worry about this at all. Jordan Addison has flashy games every now and then, scores a couple touchdowns, and then goes back to doing nothing. I think that'll be the case. Also, Justin Jefferson had like 7 receiving yards into the fourth quarter or something. That never happens and will not happen probably again this year. Toby says, I have one roster spot for a backup RB, half PPR. Marshawn Lloyd, Emmanuel Wilson, I have Jacobs, Sean Tucker, Audric Estime, Kenneth Gainwell, Blake Corum, Gus Edwards, or Trey Sermon. Wow. I think Gus Edwards is the most likely to have value for you. So he would probably top the list for me. Blake Corum and Sean Tucker and kind of Audric Estime are all similarly interesting in that they might be useful as handcuffs, but those running back rooms are tough to figure out. Or in the case of Corum, I just don't know if he's actually good yet. Emmanuel Wilson, I kind of like. Marshawn Lloyd, I would not pick up because he's out with appendicitis right now. He finally got back from the hamstring injury IR stint and went right back out with this appendicitis issue. But Emmanuel Wilson looks pretty good, and that's a very good offense. So I think he's the clear handcuff right now. That said, if it's one spot, I think I just go with Gus Edwards because Gus Edwards can sometimes be playable in the right matchups as a flex, a deep flex. But he's also the clear number 2 if something were to happen to J.K. Dobbins, which has happened every year of J.K. Dobbins' career. No, knock on wood, no hate on J.K. Dobbins. And, of course, that role is really, really good, and the offense is good. So I go Gus Edwards there. Jelly of the Month says, grabbing some Vele, like the targets. Agree. Do it. Pinoy Penn says, what QBs to target to stash for the Week 14 bye week? I have Rodgers, Lawrence, and Winston on my waivers. Okay, so I'm assuming you're saying your quarterback has a bye in Week 14. Rodgers, I don't know if I'll have a job by Week 14. There's been a lot of talk of him getting shut down. If he does, they get the Dolphins on the road. I don't really love that. Trevor Lawrence, I don't know if he'll be back yet either, as things are kind of up in the air for him. He gets the Titans on the road. I don't like that either. And Jameis Winston will be at the Steelers. We saw him against the Steelers at home. Wasn't that great. Don't really love that either. Is there anybody else you can get? Kirk Cousins on the road against the Vikings. Don't even really particularly love that, but he's probably available. Derek Carr on the road against the Giants might not be terrible. That's something to look at. Oh, Will Levis at home against the Jaguars. Will Levis is probably available on your waiver wire. That would be the guy. He actually made the column for me this week. He's been playing a little better lately, and he gets the Jaguars twice over the home stretch. I believe it's Week 14 and the Fantasy Championship in Week 17. Week 14, he gets the Jaguars at home. So Will Levis would probably be the guy I would smash. Looking briefly to see if there's anybody else. Not really. Yeah, I would think I would go get Will Levis. Toby says, what was Toby following up on? The RB roster spot question. Toby also says, I have Bo Nix on bye in Week 14. Looking ahead, okay, this might be the same sort of question. Do I pick up Geno at Arizona, Lawrence at Titans, or Will Levis at home versus Jaguars? I have Ridley. Thanks, Matt. Look at that. We already answered your question with Pinoy Pens. Yeah, it's Will Levis smash. Incidentally, you have Geno at Arizona available, which was not on Pinoy's list. That one's also pretty decent. I like that. But I think I'd go Will Levis against the Jaguars. As crazy as that sounds. Tyler Sperry says thoughts on McNichols. I shared those, so probably this question was after or before I shared my thoughts on McNichols. I think he's interesting. If both guys are out, I think he's definitely playable. We will see what happens, particularly with Robinson, whether the ankle is serious. And Eckler, I think, is likely to miss next week because concussions usually keep people out a week, and his seemed really rough. Pinoy Pen says thoughts on Tank Bigsby coming off injury and bye. This is tough because this running back room has been so wonky and the offense has been rough. 2 weeks heading into the bye, he was terrible. 4 total yards, 22 total yards. Before that, he had 86, 118, 24, and 129 and had 2 touchdowns in 2 of those games. It's really, really hard to figure out what the Jaguars are going to do at the running back position, whether their offense will be functional. So I think he should be rostered. I will say that. I'm probably not going to start him. Let's see who they're playing. The Jaguars are facing the Texans in, by the way, a week with no buys. Why do you do this to us, NFL schedule makers? No buys this week. 6 teams on bye last week. He should be rostered, but I wouldn't start him. I would just try to see what they do coming out of their bye. Coming out of the bye specifically is interesting because they might have a chance to say, like, all right, we really want to evaluate what we do with the running back room through this bye week. Let's practice what we want to do, and then we'll come out the bye with our solid idea. So we might get a strong sense of whether they want to go Bigsby or ETN or mix it up. But yeah, he should be rostered but not started, I think. Michael Quenzel with a super chat. Thank you for the super chat, Michael. Highly appreciate it. If anybody else wants to drop these in here, helps a lot. Trade deadline tonight. Trade Kelsey and Tracy for Bowers and Pollard, or Kelsey and Hunt for Hawkinson and Pollard, or neither. Lowell trading for playoff schedule. Wow, interesting. Okay. I don't think that the tight end schedule matters too much to these particular guys because they're such strong players. Kelsey gets a great matchup next week, a terrible one in week 14, a good one in week 15, and a bad one in week 16, and a middling one in week 17. So it's very back and forth for Kelsey. Bowers has a pretty good schedule. AFPA rankings for the next 5 games: 19th, 27th, 17th, 31st, 23rd. That's the rest of the season for him, actually. So I'm gonna be pretty interested in anything that gets me Bowers. Pollard has also been playing pretty well. Yeah, I think it'd be that one. I think I go Kelsey and Tracy for Bowers and Pollard. I think Tracy and Pollard are kind of almost just a wash at this point, and Bowers is a strong improvement over Kelsey for me rest of season. So I would do that move, Michael. Michael Quenzel also said, Vele is clear number 2 in Denver. Great for a flex spot rest of season. Big facts. William E., I've used your advice to get Bucky Irving and Tyrone Taylor. I assume that means Tyrone Tracy earlier in the season. But now's the time to sit Jonathan Taylor for either one. I play in a much harder standard scoring league. You're not sitting Jonathan Taylor for Bucky Irving just because while he was good last week, Rashad White and Sean Tucker, goodness, I was thinking Trey Tucker in my mind. I've been playing this game for too long. But Rashad White and Sean Tucker are too involved to trust Bucky Irving right now. He's going to be good, I think, a lot of weeks, but there's such high risk of him doing nothing. Now, in fairness, I think to your point, Jonathan Taylor has had a few games of nothing that are getting kind of frustrating. 35 scrimmage yards last week, 60 the week before, 59 4 weeks ago. Was really good 3 weeks ago. Tyrone Tracy, I think there is a non-zero chance you can look at sitting Jonathan Taylor for Tyrone Tracy is certainly in the right matchups. His last 7 games in scrimmage yards. So this is since he became the starter, actually. 70, 104, 69, 150, 32. There's a terrible 6 carries in that game, 3 catches. He might have gotten hurt. Can't remember. 107, 130. So I think you're actually starting Tyrone Tracy over Jonathan Taylor almost without question, unless Jonathan Taylor has a great matchup and Tracy has a really bad one. He's just been like matchup proof, offense sucks proof, highly efficient, lots of touches and lots of yards. So, yeah, I think you're starting Tyrone Tracy over Jonathan Taylor most weeks. Michael Quenzel in Superflex Dynasty. Love to see those questions. For anyone who doesn't know, I am a big Dynasty guy. In Superflex Dynasty, traded Tank Dell, for ETN. I have CMC, Gibbs, Dowdle, and Abdullah. No, I don't think I'm doing this. I don't trust Travis Etienne to be good. And I think Tank Dell has a lot of upside and ability to be like a rest of career wide receiver too. And your CMC Gibbs core is, well, CMC is getting older, but yeah, I don't think I'm doing this. The only reason I wouldn't even do this if I was a strong competitor, because Tank Dell is like probably a better flex than ETN at this point. And if you're rebuilding, I definitely wouldn't do it. So I'm sticking with Dell there. One more question from Michael, or maybe this is just a thought from Michael Quinzel. Levis has a very good playoff schedule: Cincinnati, Indy, and Jacksonville. Yep. I like Will Levis made the column. I think he's a good ad. William E says, yeah, I'm discombobulated. Thanks. That's on the Jonathan Taylor question. You know, it's not crazy. Again, Jonathan Taylor has been bad 3 of the last 4 games, and Tyrone Tracy is playing better than him, so he should be started ahead of him. Jermaine Robinson with what would be the last question, unless anyone drops another one in chat while I answer this one. Is Noah Gray a thing? As a Kelsey owner, I had to watch more TD vulturing. No, Noah Gray is not a thing. Noah Gray catches some touchdowns every once in a while for the Chiefs, or he comes with a big catch down the sideline, and we all think it's Travis Kelsey and get excited, and then it turns out to be Noah freaking Gray. This happens every now and then. It will happen a couple more times this year, maybe. I think his 2-touchdown game this past Sunday is probably the best of his career, past, present, or future. Travis Kelsey is the guy. I'm not concerned about Noah Gray, and I don't want to add him. He did not make my waiver wire column. Not interested. All right, that is it. That is all the Q&A. So we will cut it there. Thank you all for showing up for the questions. Good stuff. Announcement for anybody who listens to the Most Accurate podcast, all the shows every throughout the week. We are going to be off Friday. It is post-Thanksgiving Black Friday holiday time. So John Paulson and I will be off. If you have questions, hit us up on Twitter. I'm at Matt Okada. John is at 444_John. I think that's off the top of my head. Don't quote me. Just look up John Paulson on Twitter or on Blue Sky. He's all over Blue Sky, really into Blue Sky. So you might want to hit him up there. It's actually probably more likely he would interact with you on Blue Sky. I am also on Blue Sky. Not that heavily interacting there yet. I'm suspect that it actually has staying power, but we'll see. This is not important waiver wire content here. This is my random social media opinions of the day. But yeah, no pod on Friday. So if you have questions, start sit. Start sit. You can look online at John's rankings to help make those decisions. But any other questions, matchup questions, let us know on socials and we'll try to get back to you. But no show. One more question dropped in chat while I was saying that. Hey, bro, thoughts on Vele? This is from Cap for Life. I answered this question earlier in the show, Cap. I like him. Go check out my waiver wire column on 444.com. You can subscribe with promo code YouTube for 25% off if you're not already a subscriber, and you can get my full thoughts and how high of a priority I have on Vele. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone. Enjoy your family time, food time, whatever it is for you. And of course, football time. Let me look at the games. What are the games? Bears, Lions, Giants, Cowboys, Dolphins, Packers. Bears, Lions could be sneaky fun. Kalen Williams playing a little better in the new offense. Lions are maybe the best team in football. Giants, Cowboys should be an absolute crap fest, but could be fun watching Tommy DeVito and Cooper Rush battle it out. And Dolphins, Packers should be a good one. So the nightcap is nice. All right. I will sign off there. See y'all. Happy Thanksgiving.